The views and opinions expressed by the guests and hosts of this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Lansdowne Public Library or its affiliates.
Welcome to the Lansdowne Public Library's Geek Out podcast,
where we geek out about just about anything. I'm one of your hosts, Alex.
And I'm your other host, Christina. Everyone's passionate about something, so we'll sit down with a variety of people to chat about their interests.
And today, we're joined here by...
I'm Dave.
I'm Jeff, one of the librarians here.
And we're going to talk about one of the largest brands, the largest brand in the world in terms of sales, Pokemon. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
What can you tell us? Just what is Pokemon? Just at the very, very basics. What is Pokemon? It is many things, obviously, but what are some of the things that Pokemon has become? What did it start out as?
Well, I guess we'll start with the name. It's sort of is it portmanteau?
Yeah, portmanteau.
Portmanteau of pocket and monster. The concept is that the little title characters are supposed to be able to be put inside capsules that can fit inside your pocket, and you can take them anywhere.
At the beginning, I suppose that, Pokemon, when it first launched, it was, of course, a video game on the Game Boy series of consoles, an RPG focused on battling and collecting these various monsters, loosely based on the creator's experience collecting and battling insects as a youth.
Fun fact, that is a PSAT question.
Really?
It's an open-ended one, yeah.
Really?
That's kind of hilarious.
Wow.
That's sort of where it started, and it takes a lot of inspirations from other RPGs. One of the big things that makes Pokemon unique among RPGs is being able to trade, which comes from, similarly, one of the creators played Dragon Quest and got a super rare weapon twice. The second one he couldn't do anything with. Only one character could equip it. Meanwhile, his friend was trying to find the same weapon and couldn't. And he thought, well, that's dumb.
Yeah.
In Pokemon instead, it's, you get two of that really cool Pokemon. Yeah, you can trade your friend.
And it's been a thing since the start, but they would release two versions of the game with most of the same, creatures in it, except each version would have some that were exclusive. So if you wanted to, as you may have heard the phrase, catch them all, you had to have a friend or enough money to afford a second
Game Boy cartridge
console,
and the link cable.
Be friends or have rich.
Yeah.
You can have both.
Yeah.
But it's much easier
to do one or the other.
So to play either one of those games, you actually had to have two separate consoles, you're saying?
So to catch every Pokemon, you needed, for example, in Japan the first games were red and green. In America it was red and blue. Mm-hmm. I had Pokemon Red, which meant that I could not, in my game, catch one of my favorite Pokemon at the time, Meowth. He just isn't in Pokemon Red. So I had to find somebody who had Pokemon Blue and trade them. I think it was Ekans was our equivalent exclusive, so that I could get his Meowth, he could have Ekans, and then we could, fill them out in our Pokedex. It was kind of fun that it encouraged, socializing in a fairly unique way among games where usually it's, very much a competitive thing. And in fairness, you could battle your friends as well, which was always fun as a kid.
And I think it seems like it's continued to be fairly unique in terms of collection RPGs. I'm not very familiar with any even modern collection-based RPGs that have a trading mechanic built in.
A few have tried. I know Dragon Quest had their Monster Collectathon. I think it had two versions and you could trade. And the Digimon games would have different versions at least once or twice. But they didn't have, as far as I know, a trade mechanic. It was just different versions of the story with different available monsters.
Yeah. I think, actually with its release coming up soon, the Battle Network Mega Man games, I think you could trade battle chips.
Yeah, you could trade the battle chips, which is kind of similar but very different style of game, too.
Yeah. But, it's a good point, because I can't, outside of a massive multiplayer online role-playing game, I can't think of many things that are here, trade your items
Trade
away.
your items, have fun.
Can't even do that in online card games.
No, well, yeah, that's a whole different can of worms. My opinions on that particular problem. Amusingly enough, though, in the Pokemon card game online, you can trade cards in that. It's one of the few that let you, again. which makes sense. It's kind of part of the core identity of the franchise.
Yeah. Speaking of this idea of it being kind of more of a social game, when they had, I think it was Pokemon Go, you could meet up with people and you could, again, it was very encouraging going outside, meeting up with people, finding things. So do you think that is kind of what they're going for? It is a social game? I know all games you play with people, but this is really that social forward.
Yeah. Again, with maybe the exception of an MMO, I feel Pokemon as a franchise is like the most social game. Because even like the fighting game community, a lot of what they do, it's one-on-one and it's all competitive. Like, sure, there are friendships there and all that, I'm sure, but because it's just a competitive game, there is so much more of a sense of, combativeness instead of camaraderie, I feel.
Yeah, with Pokemon Go, they took certain ones and region-locked them. So, for instance, only in America can you get Tauros, the one that looks like a
bison.
A bison.
Yeah.
But if you go to, I guess it's roughly around, technically I did it in South Carolina, so I don't know where the cutoff is. Yeah. But if you go far enough south towards the equator, you can catch ones shaped like piranha plants. Venus fly. This is how bad. I have like video game brain rot. No, you can catch Venus flytrap Pokemon, but also I think if you go farther, like to the tip of Florida, you're just in the cutoff zone for catching one that's shaped like coral.
Yeah.
So,
which is mostly otherwise only in South America and Australia are the only places that one normally is caught. Similarly, what was it? Was that X and Y or no? It was Black and White. The Vivillon.
That was 6. That was X and Y.
Was that X and Y?
Yep.
There was a butterfly Pokemon you could catch with very different, vibrant patterns depending what region of the world you were in when you caught it.
Nice.
Ranging from like Hawaii had its own very specific one. Japan's looked like the rising sun and the image of the wings. Like these were all really cool. And the only way to, get them back and forth was trading with people from across the world, which was super neat.
And would you have to meet those people in person to do that, or
for the most part, it's on that at least was online. Thankfully, the modern age of Pokemon is long gone. Are the days of trying to find a link cable and hoping the infrared ports on your DS would line up. Not only could you do it online, but like you can, and you still can, although it's not as fun in the current generation. You could just send a random Pokemon and receive anything in return, which was a lot of fun. The community is pretty widespread, and like in Gen 6, they had a globe that you could look at and see the people you've interacted with, like where you had done trades and where people you had done battles with. Yeah. And I thought that was super cool.
Yeah. Well, you started out saying the largest brand in the world, then there is this very large community to work with. I want to we're talking about it in general, get a little bit more specific since it is this huge brand. Obviously, a lot of people are involved in it, but how did you two get started with Pokemon?
Well, to kind of quote like Bane from Batman, I was born into it.
Molded by.
Technically, I have only been around since 5-6 months after the original games came out. So it's sort of been a thing. It's been around all my life because I had siblings that have friends that all got into Pokemon around that time. So, of course, I was like, just, all right, I guess this is cool. And then went from there and met friends through it and all that. So I didn't have the video games for a long time. But I remember watching the TV show. I had, like, toys and books, and we'd go to Blockbuster and rent the movies. That's what I remember.
My start is fairly unique, I would say. Pokemon Red and Blue were released in September of 1998. My first experience with Pokemon was in 1997. My dad is an Air Force mechanic, so he traveled around the world, and very frequently he would go to Japan because there was an Air Force base there that, he was a specialist for some of their machinery. So he'd always go and he'd come back usually with Godzilla figurines or Ultraman or Dragon Ball stuff before Dragon Ball had been translated into the West. I was at the front of the anime curve in a kind of fun way. But, basically what he would do, because he didn't know what any of this stuff was, is he'd go into a store, he'd ask the clerk, what's the most popular thing with the kids? So in 1997, he comes back with these little weird-looking creatures that would fit on the top of your pencil and a pack of cards. And I know the pack of cards very specifically because the first foil Pokemon I ever pulled, and for a brief period my favorite Pokemon, was Kabutops. So it was the fossil set specifically. I still have that Kabutops. But yeah, and I had no idea what any of this was until like a year later, the first commercials start airing, and I'm looking at these little things on my shelf, and I'm like, wait a minute. I know that guy. Yeah. I've known that guy for years.
Well, that's pretty cool. So, one of the first.
Yeah, one of the first in the U.S. to have any experience, and I've been more or less obsessed consistently since.
Very nice.
So you guys have mentioned a few Meowth or something. Forgive me if I got that wrong. I'm a novice to Pokemon, so you've mentioned some of these Pokemon characters. Who is your favorite Pokemon? You've kind of hinted at some. So can you tell me what animal they represent, maybe, for some of us who are Pokemon novices?
I mean, the second half of that's a little complicated with my favorite, because my current favorite is a Pokemon called Mimikyu. Mimikyu is kind of, in a weird way, a response to a trend in Pokemon. So I imagine you've at least heard of Pikachu. You're familiar with him.
Yes.
He's, the big mascot. Mm-hmm. Every generations of games have tried to capitalize that on making a new version of Pikachu. You had Plusle and Minun in Gen 2, and Emolga, I think that was Gen 4 or 5, Togedemaru, who's the best fake Pikachu, but
usually it's a rodent.
It's a rodent, it's electric type, and it's probably yellow. Mimikyu is a ghost type that hides itself in a disguise crudely made to resemble Pikachu. Because as a ghost, it wasn't very popular and it wanted friends, so it made itself look like the most popular thing it could find, which was Pikachu.
Okay. So some fourth wall breaking?
A little bit. Like, as a fan, I'm like, this is a joke about all of the failed attempts to capitalize on Pikachu's popularity. But the difference is like, those were all intentionally very super cute, whereas Mimikyu is cute, but also just a touch creepy and like... Because it's in a costume, the eyes don't blink and that the mouth doesn't move. It's just always in like a weirdly, crudely drawn smile. So it's still adorable while being absolutely creepy and uncanny valley kind of thing.
So you like the mix of the creepy and cute.
I adore things that are at least almost all of my favorite Pokemon are ghost type.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Yeah, my favorite is much. That's a great story. This is not going to follow up well, but at least it's more recognizable in terms of real world parallels. But my favorite has always been, well, I say always. I got this when it was a card, sort of before I realized there was more than 150, which kind of took a while since I didn't have access to video games right away. So like, my knowledge of like, oh man, wait a minute, I've missed like how many of these things now? But it's called Spinnerack, and it's a tiny little green spider. It's just your generic like, oh, it's an early game bug type, so it's just kind of there. But I remember having its card and being like, aw, he's kind of cute. And then realizing like, man, no one really likes this. Like no one, like, I was like, I'm going to stick in this corner. I think I'm going to stick with him.
Why wouldn't people like him, Dave, do you think?
Because
is he not as exciting or something?
Pretty much. Like, Jeff mentioned that, each game has like a Pikachu clone. Well, each game has like an early like bird and then like early bugs. So there's like butterflies and bees and crap. But early in this, it was a spider, and I was like, you know what, I like him. And as like I learned more from Pokemon, I was like, okay, no, it's based on a real world spider because it has a face on its abdomen.
Oh,
just a simple like two dots and like a line, right?
Okay.
And it can kind of like. Not so much in the games, but like in the cartoon and whatnot, it'll like kind of make emotions with that. But it's based on an actual spider I think it's called like the happy face spider or something.
Yeah,
but
it's like simple. Bright yellow with the black dots that kind of look like a classic smiley face.
Yeah, it's cute. And it's like, all right. It's simple, but you know what? It beats out everybody who's like, oh yeah, I've always loved Charizard.
Right.
Sorry, but it's like, you're not original, man.
Too many people love Charizard.
He's cool. I'll give you
It's
that,
a cool
but
Pokemon, but I'm tired of him.
You can't throw a stone at a Pokemon.
Is he like the lizard one that breathes fire? Or
Yeah,
something?
yeah. He's the most common dragon-looking Pokemon, although he's not actually a dragon, except for sometimes.
If you evolve him high enough, right, then he becomes a dragon.
One of his mega evolutions is a dragon, and in this gen you could give him a dragon terrestrialization, which is its own weird little gimmick. Pokemon does a lot of gimmicks. Some land better than others. I think the mega evolutions were probably the best of them, but, you know.
I did want to ask, because we're talking about the names, and as far as I know, many, if not all, of the Pokemon have some sort of tongue-in-cheek or outright pun in their name that is in a reference to what animal or what ability they have. So obviously that's linguistically based. So what are their original names? Or like how does it translate in as they go through languages?
It varies a lot from Pokemon to Pokemon and game to game. For example, Pikachu's name is Pikachu no matter what language you're in. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it is a Japanese pun. Chew is the sound a mouse makes.
He's a mouse?
That's the onomatopoeia for...
Okay.
And
electric mouse Pokemon.
I think Pika is... It's some kind of pun about electricity for them. I'm not entirely sure what it is offhand. Offhand, I do know Charizard's name is Lizardon. It's not Charizard. Mm. Yeah, a lot of these, Mr. Mime I know is different, but I can't remember. Wobbuffet and Wynot are Japanese puns instead. The Pokemon in Japan is essentially the baby form is like one half of a joke and the adult is the response you're supposed to make.
So the idea of making these names goofy or self-aware or something, that is a constant throughout most languages. Some of the names work better than others. Mm-hmm. I believe legendaries they try to just never translate. Like they want the legendary Pokemon names to be consistent throughout. So like Mewtwo is always Mewtwo. That the Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres are always Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres, because I guess they feel that that's kind of important to the identity of these larger-than-life, especially powerful Pokemon.
And it keeps the Spanish words
Yeah,
intact.
it is kind of fun. That's like, for anybody in Spain, those names are even sillier because it's just your normal language.
Yeah.
Or anywhere that speaks Spanish.
That's true.
Spain.
Yeah. Not just Spain.
Yeah.
Most of South America as well. Large swaths of America, in fact. But yeah, you'll find some of the puns hit, some of them don't. Some people are really defensive about the Japanese names being better, and I don't know, Lizardon doesn't do anything for me. Charizard, it feels right.
I think Charizard sounds a bit cooler than Lizardon. I know the Izzard is the lizard part in there, but it's a little more hidden, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's a little more fun to find Char-Lizard as opposed to Lizardon. In regards to Pokemon, the franchise, there are more than just the creatures. There are characters, human characters, that are the ones who are collecting them. We see that, again, in the games. Then there's been a lot of movies and TV shows. So do you guys have a favorite gym leader or another human character from any of the franchise's different arms? Or are you Team Rocket?
I mean, I do have a very real soft spot for Jesse and James, having grown up with that show for so long.
Can we backtrack? What is a gym leader? For those of us listening?
In the Pokemon games, sort of the goal is you are a trainer, which means you capture Pokemon, train them, evolve them, and also journey across this landscape, going to different towns. And some of these towns are small and just kind of uneventful. Mm-hmm. Others are like big sprawling cities, or sometimes they're like tree houses, like all sorts of neat places. One of them's like a spaceport, like with a shuttle and everything.
One of them's just a dormant-ish volcano.
Oh, geez, yeah. At some of these more extreme locations, there are what are called gyms, which are essentially challenges. So the trainers are supposed to go through, they fight other trainers, and at the end of it, there's a gym leader. And each of these gyms are themed, so you'll go up against, this is a fire-themed gym, or water, so you'll tackle gym leaders' very specific typeset Pokemon.
Okay.
And gym leaders are usually the toughest, they've got the most variety, and as you go on, they get tougher and have more Pokemon with them.
Okay.
And every time you beat them, you get a gym badge. You need all 8 to be able to challenge usually it's Elite Four. I don't know if they've changed
it's
that.
Still 4.
It's still 4.
It's consistently been 4, and I think basically everything but...
Sun and Moon?
Yeah, Sun and Moon was a little bit weird because it was a tournament sort of instead. But it was still ultimately ended up being 4, but they didn't call themselves the Elite Four.
But yeah, so you face them and then you fight the champion. Like that's how you're supposed to progress through the game. And early on, gym leaders were used as sort of a level cap, because you could just putter around and level up your Pokemon so they were super strong. But if they got to certain levels, and especially if you traded somebody for, if they gave you something higher level than what you have, it would have the opportunity that the Pokemon just wouldn't listen to you. It just wouldn't respect you because you didn't have...
You hadn't proven yourself.
You hadn't proven yourself worthy. So when you got gym badges, they usually allowed access to either progress in the game or also... Now you can, train Pokemon up to this level.
Up to level 60 will now obey you. As well as, like, in the early games more than in the more recent ones, that was also a way to limit travel, was there would be special moves you would have to have the gym badge to use, like cut to get through trees or surf to cross the water. So they were a gating mechanism as well as, like, in story, like, these strong trainers you had to overcome.
So I guess like Alex had said, I'm sorry, I had to take an intermission and ask you what a gym leader was. So is there a favorite gym leader that you guys had, to go back to this question?
It's really tough because there's so many good...
There's a lot of fun gym leaders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the gym leaders are where a lot of, I feel, the design budget for the human end of Pokemon at least goes. Like, the generic trainers all look basically the same, but the gym leaders will usually be fairly ornate, sometimes too ornate, in fact.
I guess I always think of, like, one of my favorites is probably the guy that lives in the volcano, Blaine. Because there's, like, all these, like, you meet all these, like, really cool people, and then there's just this old bald guy who's just kind of angry in a volcano.
Nice.
And he's towards, like, the end of the challenge.
Yeah, he's one of the later gyms. He's really strong.
Yeah, and in the comics and things, like, he is really strong and kind of hot-headed, but also, like, just a really cool dude. So I always think of Blaine. I
mean, there's a lot, and in my head I keep going to, I forget if she's Gen 3 or Gen 4, but it's Phoebe. She's a ghost trainer, and a lot of the ghost trainers we see are, intentionally kind of either creepy or kind of evil looking. And Phoebe is adorable. She is a fire dancer. She's a Hawaiian fire dancer. And instead of it being, the dreading of death, it's the celebration of life is her whole purpose with the ghost types. Okay. And I love just that she was the first ghost type trainer we see that isn't like an old person surrounded by death like Agatha was.
Agatha and Morty.
Yeah.
They'll always... I think their characters really shined in the second generation because the one gym leader, you beat her and she gets so upset she doesn't give you the gym badge. So you have to, like, track her down. And basically everyone's like, come on. Like,
you're better than this. Act your age.
And then one won't let you even challenge her until you help the electric Pokemon at the top of the lighthouse. It's sick, but you need to get it medicine so that it can power the lighthouse. So you need to go
the
help.
chips don't crash.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
It is interesting because I think, Gen 2 and Black and White, I think, do the best with actually having the gym leaders as characters. Like, they interact with you. You talk to them more than just when you get to the end of their gym and fight them and they have one line of dialogue. They're more characters then.
So they more human gym leaders in general, for the most part?
Well, all of them are human.
I don't
think we've had, like, a robot or anything weird like that. There are sometimes some weird things in Pokemon, but
and there are literal ghosts.
Yeah.
But the creators, anytime they're asked, will just not acknowledge them, despite them being like they're not glitches. There are ghosts that you can encounter with really weird things. But anytime anybody asks, they're just like, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, like, not even the ghost Pokemon. There's what gen was that with the girl from the elevator?
That was 6. No, she comes out and is like...
just glitches around the room, gives you the cryptic message of, no, you're not the one, and then vanishes.
Oh.
This is never brought up again. There's also the haunted house in the middle of the old chateau.
In Gen 4,
And none of this is ever brought up in like a way to.
Apparently, you're not the one. So
it's
so somebody else gets this.
it's Pokemon likes to do a little bit of weird, creepy things every once in a while that I'm always a fan of seeing.
Okay, very nice.
But beyond the gym leaders, there's always your rivals, who most games you're designed to hate.
So, who are some of those rivals?
The most famous is always going to be Gary Oak. He's your original rival and
grandson to the first professor that gives you your first Pokemon.
He also has the unfortunate problem of you get to name him.
Oh.
You get to name your rival in, I think, just Gen 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
After that, they were like, people keep naming him vulgar things. You know what?
Oh, you can actually...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also, your rival would always pick, out of the 3 starter Pokemon that you could pick, like if you picked Squirtle...
Squirtle's my guy.
He would always pick Bulbasaur because grass beats water. So he would always pick that. So it doesn't matter if you pick Bulbasaur, he would pick Charmander. And it was like, well, that's a jerk move.
And that continued for a while. Now, unfortunately, I don't know how I feel, because now they will pick the one that you beat easier, and I'm just like, that's kind of less fun. I want them to be a problem.
Yeah.
Although the most recent rival, Pneumonia. It's pneumonia or pneumona. I haven't heard anyone actually say it aloud. Like, they haven't gotten to this gen in the anime yet, so I haven't heard any of the names spoken by people. The first time I read it, I was like, is her name Pneumonia? What the heck? But she's she's one of the friendlier rivals, but her whole thing is like, nope, she wants you to be a challenge for her. Like, she is actively trying to get you to the point, like, she tells you to go fight the gym so you'll be strong enough to fight her real team, basically.
Okay.
And I think that's fun, because now instead of it me being either annoyed by Gary or the previous game, Hop, I feel so bad for Hop. The whole point of the game is you destroying his dream.
What is his dream? What is his
He
dream?
wants to be the champion. Unfortunately, he's not controlled by the player.
Yeah, his dream is to defeat his brother, the undefeated champion Leon, and become the next champion. And, he spends his whole game talking about his dream and, like, there's nothing you can do but crush his dream. Like,
how sad.
I felt so bad that game.
Well, see, you just purposefully lose to him, and then imagine the game continuing.
Well, I've always liked in Generation 2, the rival is he actually steals a Pokemon.
Yeah.
And he's just like a jerk to you the whole time. And he eventually gets better, but like the really neat thing, and I didn't know this till they remade the games, but there was a sort of a secret cutscene you could trigger if you had a certain Pokemon that they would only give you through like an official Nintendo event, so you couldn't just get it. But essentially it does this kind of a time travel shenanigan, and you find out the kid that's your rival, who's a jerk, is pretty much a rival because he wants to be strong enough to fight his dad, who is the main villain from the first game.
Yeah. This is quite the soap opera.
There's a bit of that in Pokemon.
Pokemon is so extreme. Just sometimes. It just goes... Yeah. In Gen 6, what was there... Like, what was Team Flame? Or what were they?
Team Flare, I think?
Team Flare. And they were all just super extra. And I can't
dressed like Lady Gaga.
I can't even remember what their goal was. But it was basically like, we're just so out there.
I'm pretty sure their plan was literally just like extermination of all life.
Okay.
Like something along those lines. Like the villain teams vary wildly in goals. Like Team Rocket is just the Mafia. I get this. I understand where we're going from. We deal with them for 2 generations, and then it's Aqua and Magma, who either want to flood the Earth or cover the Earth and land so that there's no water. And it's like, I can at least sort of understand Magma's idea. Like, no, we want more land for everyone to live on. I get you. Why drown the Earth? What's the end goal here? It's already mostly water.
Atlantis, that's the idea.
So what generation, you mentioned Gen, what generation is Pokemon up to now?
We're currently on the 9th gen.
9th generation?
Yep.
Okay.
And which would be your favorite generation?
Well, now it's my turn to be the basic one, but I really liked Generation 2. That's where Spinnerack is from, and that had Pokemon Gold, which was the first game I played, which holds just a special place in my heart, and I love it to death. And no one can make me change that.
It's a complicated question, because I think technically my answer is Gen 5, which is black and white. It had a lot of the problems of early Pokemon fixed. A lot of things made more sense. But when it was first released, when you're on your first playthrough of the game, you could not access any of the previous Pokemon. You had to play with this generation's new set.
Okay.
And, some of them were big hits. Golurk he's based on the Jewish Golem, and he's this ghost ground type, and he's super cool. But then you also get we can't have Zubat, so here's Swoobat, which is just a similar bat thing, because we needed to populate the caves. But my favorite game is actually, I think, technically in Gen 4, which is Heart Gold, Soul Silver, which is the remakes of Gen 2, which is just Gen 2, but with all of the problems fixed. You could catch a dark type before the post game. There was more than one fire type in the region.
So, I've heard the term Digimon. Can you explain to me what I'm totally a novice, like I had said. What is a Digimon?
So it's an entirely different franchise.
Oh, it is than
Yes.
Pokemon?
It's it's also a portmanteau, but it stands for Digital Monsters.
Okay.
And as inconsistent as the designs are, I would say the concept is much more consistent. Just because where Pokemon are animals, but then it gets kind of but this one's I want to say kitchen appliance, because it's
what?
Rotom, yeah.
But that's a whole, that needs a whole explanation.
Okay.
Digimon's they live in cyberspace. So when you see a cactus with boxing gloves, or just a small imp creature turn into a guy in leather who rides a motorcycle with two pistols,
very large guns,
they're Digimon. It doesn't need to make sense how it progressed. It's just this now.
Okay.
It is kind of funny, because a lot of people will complain that newer generation Pokemon look too much like Digimon. And they're just wrong, because none of the new Pokemon have worn jorts yet.
That's
Sure.
true.
Maybe in the next generation.
Digimon can talk. Pokemon,
they can.
only a select few of Pokemon can possibly talk.
The psychic types are often depicted as being able to communicate telepathically, and Meowth of Team Rocket taught itself how to talk, which raises some bizarre questions that are never answered, and probably for the best. But yeah, most Digimon are capable of speech, from hatching from their eggs. There are some weird exceptions there, but those are usually for plot reasons for whatever show it is.
Yeah.
So they're totally separate. They don't mix or mingle Pokemon and Digimon.
No.
Okay.
I believe Digimon technically came out first, but they were a line of Tamagotchi branded for boys. So instead of taking care of this cute little, angel thing that Tamagotchi tended to turn into, was here's these cool monsters that you can make fight each other.
Okay.
That's appealing, yeah.
Well, and again, it's inspired by a lot of popular pastime in Japan for small boys is collecting bugs, and oftentimes they'll collect beetles and have them fight each other, because that's just what those beetles do in nature.
Beetles are fairly territorial, and it doesn't injure either beetle. They just try to flip one another on their back,
which is actually very funny to watch.
It is. What gets a little weirder is that there are other sorts of praying mantises are fairly commonly raised for similar reasons. That's a little bit more lethal, though.
Yeah, that gets into all right, this is possibly animal
this is animal abuse,
not...
but people are okay with it because they're just bugs, which is its own problem. I mean,
stop having wasps fight spiders. Just watch the two giant beetles fight each other.
Yeah,
this was what they were meant to do.
Nobody gets hurt, and the beetles, as far as I can tell, seem to be fine with it. And I mean, there are other competitors. I mentioned the Dragon Quest tried to do their line of Dragon Quest monsters to try and compete with Pokemon.
Disney tried it once with Spectrobes, which I don't think...
That was Disney?
That was Disney, yep. And no one remembers it.
Yeah.
I just remember the ads in my National Geographic Kids magazines for about a summer.
It is interesting that there are just so many copycats to Pokemon out there. I mean, you were saying Digimon may predate it, but still so maybe they're just copying the genre, but so many attempts, and yet nothing's come close to deposing Pokemon from the throne. So we kind of talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but what makes Pokemon stand out in your opinion?
I think it's accessible. I've had this theory for a while that I think everybody has a favorite Pokemon, whether or not you really watch or interact with it at all. Because, I mean, you'll run across just in passing, it'll show up, memes or just like street art sometimes or on the internet. But anybody can look at a bunch of Pokemon and probably see a design that they're like, oh, that one's cool, or I like the look of that thing, or that looks funny, have an interaction with. There's so much variation, and none of it's like, they're not abstract. There's...
Well, Porygon. There's always... but hey, somebody's gonna like that there's the weird abstract one.
Yeah, and people like the abstract or the weird, the creepy, or sometimes the really cute ones. Last summer, a bunch of friends and I planned a beach day, and because we were staying there for like a day or two, we decided to buy matching like Hawaiian Pokemon shirts from their like official website. And we all got different ones. My one friend got a Charizard one. Mine is like a bunch of like flowers and Slowpokes. And it's just, it's just do I like Slowpoke that much? I mean, yeah, he's fun. There were no Spinarak ones.
Yeah.
But like, it's just, they're nice and they're fun. They can be just anything. And the stories, they're not super in depth. There's not like 7,000 years of lore. I think as kids, like, reading and doing all this, absorbing all this information was, like, part of it. But ultimately, I couldn't tell you what any of these Pokemon weighed or how tall they were. But I can tell you how cool I think they are.
Yeah. I mean, that is one of those weird things, though, is it's like, every Pokemon has all of those sorts of statistics listed, like their weight, their height. Every one of them has a unique cry. The older ones are substantially more garbled and, digital sounding than the newer ones because that was the technology we had at the time. So, several of the early gens are the same sound, just slightly modified. Whereas, now it's this proper, almost realistic animal sound. And it's so weird. I think a large part of how Pokemon has hit the top and stayed on top is, honestly, merchandising. When Pokemon hit, within a year they had a massive anime. The card game followed not long after. Again, I literally had merchandise of this show before the show was out in the States. Like, if you were to go to Japan, you would be hard-pressed to find some store that didn't have something with a Pokemon on it. Even grocery stores, like, they have branded snacks. They have probably even, like, weird tie-ins with clothing lines now, even shoes. Like, it's kind of in a lot of similar ways to Disney. It's unavoidable in a weird way, and
I can say, growing up, I never watched Pokemon. I never played any of the games. I never read any of the books, but I was very, very aware of it.
Yeah,
it was all around, and I think because of the generation I am. I would go trick-or-treating and would get Pokemon stuff. And so I knew all this stuff about Pokemon, having never even partaken. And so, I had Pokemon cards, never played a game, and yet it was so accessible. It was everywhere.
It is, and in a lot of ways it still is. Like, it's never been as big as it was when Red and Blue launched, other than maybe like the first week of Pokemon Go's existence where everyone was like, holy crap. And ran out and into the streets and played a game that at the time was barely functioning.
That was a magical time.
It was.
I think about those like 2 months in summer of 2016 very fondly.
Yeah. It was a blast. Like, nothing like it had happened before. And Lord knows the company that made that has tried to recapture that lightning in a bottle dozens of times. You know, they've tried Harry Potter, they tried Pikmin, which was a really, really? You thought, I guess it was another Nintendo property you could get your hands on, but you were hoping Pikmin would pick up as many people as Pokemon did. Just for the sake of argument, everyone here raise your hand if you've heard of Pikmin. Yeah, it's not exactly
3 out of 4 made the record
not exactly
show.
unanimous, but everyone will have heard of Pokemon.
And to be fair, this is a skewed bias.
Yeah, this is a skewed bias because
and I will say the only reason I've heard of them is because of Smash Bros.
Yeah, that's true. Olimar getting into Smash Brothers has helped Pikmin in much the same way that Ness and Lucas got Americans to talk more about the Earthbound franchise.
Shoot, Ness and Lucas, you're talking about Roy and Marth getting Fire Emblem into that.
Yeah, Fire Emblem was not huge and
Anyway.
With all of this very, very good advertising and merchandising, what is your favorite aspect of the Pokemon franchise? Like we've been talking about, there's comic books, there's the TV shows, there's movies. There was a live-action movie not that long ago.
A surprisingly good one, actually. I was
Detective
very
Pikachu
impressed.
is really good.
was very impressed. I was expecting nothing, but they actually made a very competent film.
So I went to see that in theaters and was actually surprised because, again, that is the first Pokemon medium that I've consumed intentionally, and I was able to follow along with the story, and I thought, I'm not sure when it came out in comparison to Sonic, but it looked a lot better than Sonic. Which might not be saying much, I know.
I mean, Sonic had some real problems during its development.
Yeah.
The Pokemon in that didn't look perfect. Part of that is working closely with Nintendo, who was very protective of that property. But favorite, for me, I'm always going to be... The games are the main thing. The core games are always going to be the big deal for me. I literally just got back from PAX, in which I spent 4 days playing games with people, both friends and strangers, just playing Pokemon with people and having a blast doing it. As far as the other media, I will say the Pokemon Adventures mangas specifically.
Available here at this Linmei.
Yeah, we have quite a few volumes of them here. You know, the anime is fun and cute, and it has Team Rocket, and I love Team Rocket, but the Pokemon Adventures manga is how I kind of always felt the games made me feel, where it's like, oh no, the threat is serious, and these battles are huge monsters slamming against each other.
I would have to agree. I have tons of Pokemon cards. I have a lot of figures. I have some of the movies on VHS and DVD. But it's the games that I think really have stuck with me. And not even so the main... Because we're talking about like the main genre of games, like the RPGs. But we haven't talked about like Pokemon Stadium, which was for the Nintendo 64, where it was the first, the Pokemon are now in 3D, and you can fight them and play goofy minigames.
Those were some great minigames.
Great minigames. But even, Pokemon Snap, which was just, again, in the era of, we just gotta make more Pokemon games. They made one where it's what would be classified as a rail shooter, where you follow a set path, but they made it so you are a photographer and are charged with taking pictures of as many Pokemon as you can.
Okay.
And they remade it recently and added a whole bunch of new, features, like take photos, edit the photos, change the color, saturation, add things to them. And it fleshes out, this world, and it's never super consistent. You're never in the same place in these side games. But
you're always on some weird mystery island or...
Right.
Yeah.
But it always makes it if you throw an apple at this Charmander and knock him into the lava pool, or this Charmeleon, I should say, he will then emerge as a Charizard, and then you take a photo. But it's if this was the real world, imagine if these creatures like that's how it was, you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't really tie in real world biology or zoology, but it makes it feel like these aren't just monsters on a screen. These are
people living,
these are
creatures living their lives in the wild. Coincidentally, new Pokemon Snap, also available at this and other libraries.
It is, and it's 100%.
It's a fantastic game.
I love that game. I still haven't beat it, but it's phenomenal. I love it. It's gorgeous.
How do you feel about the franchise as it's developed, as it's, evolved? Have there been choices that you've really enjoyed, like this adding of this side games and the remastering to world build? Or have there been things where you really wish they didn't do, if you wanted it more simple? How has it evolved?
Well, I'm sure Jeff has like a laundry list.
I've got some problems, admittedly. A lot of my complaints honestly stem from one simple fact, which is this is the largest franchise on Earth, and its developer hasn't really grown. Like, the development team remains very small, and the most recent game feels very unfinished in a way that is kind of depressing. But I think my biggest problem has been a consistent one that I understand the root cause of, but as an adult annoys me, which is they keep making the games easier, which I get that, hey, this is a game that's primary target audience is young kids. But Black 2 and White 2 had the option for a hard mode. And I don't know why that didn't continue down the line. Because it's, for some perspective, in Pokemon, your party is always limited to a total of 6 of these monsters. You can have 6 of them on you during any battle. In, I think, the last 3 mainline games, there have been no enemy trainers that had a full 6 Pokemon. The champion of the region in the most recent game only has 5 Pokemon on her team. This is the greatest trainer on the continent, and that they couldn't, give her the full 6 Pokemon. I can forgive that because, again, this is a game for younger kids first and foremost, but I would love the option to be like, hey, listen, I've been playing your games since the first one came out. I think I can handle a little bit more difficulty than this. And it's funny because, some of the side games are, unforgiving at points. The mystery dungeon games can be brutal at parts. But the mainline games have been getting easier and easier, and a lot of things keep getting removed. The big change I remember was when they finally got rid of Mega Evolutions and everyone was really aggravated. And they keep trying new gimmicks to replace it, but none of them have been as popular. And the most recent game removed a lot of character customization. And again, the reason given is, you're in a private school. You have to wear the uniform. I get that, but it feels like, coming from a game where you had hundreds of different shirts and pairs of pants and all that you could change, getting instead, here's some glasses and gloves, and here's 8 hats that are all the ugliest hat you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like a reverse move to me.
Yeah.
At an age where everything can be customized, why reverse that?
Why lower it?
Mm-hmm.
But I still enjoy the games. I just wish Game Freak would maybe realize they need more support than they are being given.
Is it a lot of the original people working on it?
I know quite a few of the names have stayed the same, and they've probably doubled in size, but they have a staff of, I think, 100 and maybe 140 or so. Compare that to any game in the Mario franchise, which are the modern 3D Mario is easily 300 to 500 people working on that title. Right. And then you get into the AAA games where it's literally thousands of people working on titles. And this is the largest franchise in the world, and its core games is, less than 200 people working on it is insane to me personally.
Yeah, I think if I have any gripes that are at the forefront, it's someone made a really good post, and it always sticks with me, but the games obviously cater to a younger audience. A lot of the designs over time have gotten kind of more cutesy, and more marketable. So, like they pointed out, a really neat thing they did was they went, okay, what if we took existing Pokemon, but we're on another continent? Maybe it's different. So we're going to do, natural selection or, like Darwin's finches. It's like, they changed.
They specialized in this environment.
Right. Like there's a Vulpix, the Firefox from the original. In the Alola region, it's actually an ice type. I don't remember why.
But just because it was a much more mountainous region, so because most of that continent is cold, they evolved to live in the cold instead of,
And it's cool. I like that. They did the same thing with Ponyta, where instead of a fiery horse, it then became a fairy tale kind of unicorn in this magic forest-esque place in the one region. But the thing they pointed out was if you look at the designs, the originals sort of had more muscular shapes. They kind of looked more like real animals. Some of them had lines for muscles and definition. And the newer ones, their heads were kind of bigger, their eyes were bigger.
Okay.
They lost a bit of that, animalistic, kind of a realism to it. And I get it. This is the same game. It's here's a trash bag that's real, or here's sentient ooze. I get it.
Yeah.
Not all the designs have to be, spectacular and perfect, but at the same time, I like my ooze. I like my trash men. Yeah. I also like when they just have angry eyebrows and simple little eyes.
Yeah.
Which actually I think in this new one with Tinkaton, the little pink cute thing that just has a giant metal mallet, I think that's a great step. That's cool. So here's the edge to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need all the edge, but a little bit. Or,
especially,
just something.
Especially when you're dealing with the ghost and the dark and the psychic types. They should resemble those sort of more, and poison especially. I feel like the attempts at making cutesy poison types always feels weird to me.
Well, in some ways it kind of makes sense to cutesy because a lot of things in nature when they're poisonous.
Oh, they're vibrant and colorful, sure, but don't try and make them cute and friendly looking because it's
maybe that's
I mean, it's true. Maybe
tactic.
Yeah, maybe they are trying to trick you into into being eaten or eating them. And
with that, you're kind of talking about the how the designs have changed. And we did talk about your favorite Pokemon, but what about the ones you just love to laugh at? The weird Pokemon, the one where you just don't understand what they were going for or love to hate. How can you weird us out with some Pokemon?
Well, I'm just gonna say that's kind of a loaded question because there are some that are
some that are.
I think the more anthropomorphic they get, the weirder it is.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this I love Machamp, the bodybuilder with 4 muscly arms.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
But with the gothic Lolita.
Gothitelle,
that's kind of weird.
Gothitelle I feel is fine. Either of their pre-evolutions though, I am just not a fan.
What does Gothitelle look like?
So Gothitelle is designed to look like somebody in a Gothic Lolita-style dress. So she is essentially a tower of black with little ribbons at intervaling sections and a big ribbon on her hair. Her lore is terrifying. She is a psychic type that supposedly has seen the heat death of the universe and will share that image with people to inflict damage on them.
Oh my dear. Okay.
Yeah, so
most of the psychic Pokemon are actually very disturbing.
Yeah. The psychic types have a bit of a weird flair to them that I do love for that reason. But yeah, the anthropomorphic ones, especially how many starters we've got in a row where it's just and now it's human shaped. Please let the cats just stay on 4 legs. I'm begging you, Game Freak.
I forgot about that.
I was kind of okay with Incineroar just because he's a big dumb wrestler and that's kind of fun, but Sprigatito's evolution also standing on 2 legs.
Well, Sobble going from a cute little lizard thing to just this
James Bond, but a lizard.
Yeah, he kind of did. He does look like
he's supposed to be a spy. That region was England. He was very much intentionally styled to be James Bond.
So on behalf of someone like me, who knows nothing, I appreciate you explaining some of these characters. So how can a person that's new to Pokemon, how can we get started if we're super interested based on what you're telling us?
I mean, there's a couple easy ways. Any of the most recent generations of Pokemon, either Scarlet and Violet or Sword and Shield, are both on the Switch.
Okay.
They're a very easy way to get in it. If you're not really interested in the battling so much, but you still want to get to see this world, the new Pokemon Snap is a fantastic option. Normally I'd pitch the anime, but things are kind of weird in that regard right now. Because normally the anime is pretty... There is an overarching arc for each season, usually dealing with the current generation of games. Right now, they're in the middle of ending the version of the anime that features the main character, Ash. So, right now, if you were to join in, you're getting something that it's yep, we expect you to have 20 years knowledge of this franchise because we're putting this to an end and we want to, have these big throwbacks.
Yeah, that's true. The main face of the human characters is being retired, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. But there's there is a new anime starting, I believe, next month. And I mean, you can find the classic episodes of the anime. I think Netflix has the rights to it right now.
I think they're also on their website.
Yeah, I think you can just watch it on.
So we can jump in and maybe try that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't go look. Yeah, this is the one time where I can't just be just start with whatever's on now. Right. None of this matters because this is the one time where it's no, you actually need to have reason to care about this character instead of just dropping in the middle of the end.
What I would suggest, and I always say this with any series that has a numerous amount of characters. What I would always say is just look at the stuff, Google it. If take your favorite animal and say that Pokemon and see what comes up. You'll probably get a lot of fan interpretations, but usually the first thing that should pop up is if it exists, it will be that Pokemon. And just look at it. Do you like it? Think about it. If you don't like it, okay, maybe just see what else is around, Find something, because you're probably going to like one of them.
Yeah.
You're going to find something you like. You don't like animals? Cool. There are possessed swords, for instance. Or there's just giant
trash bags?
Giant trash bags.
The Garbodor line.
Do you like dinosaurs? They got dinosaurs.
We got so many dinosaurs.
Or, and there's so much variety. There's a lot of charm and character in it. If you just find something that
find
looks
your hook,
interesting.
essentially. Yeah, find what hooks you.
All the Pokemon have a charm to them. I know everybody, given the chance, can find one that they like. Maybe that'll lead to one they love. I would say just look through, see if you can find something, and then go from there. If you don't like it, it's not your thing. You won't like it, it won't be your thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's, like I said, it's accessible. You will more than likely find something that goes, you know what? I like this little guy.
Thank you both for coming on to the show. Hopefully we'll have you back sometime.
I'm sure we can finagle something.
And thank you for listening in to hear what we're geeking out about today. If you'd like to geek out with us sometime, just email us at lansdowne@delcolibraries.org.
You can also visit our website at lansdowne.library.org/podcasts and click the green Register Here button. And that's all for us.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah.